The cold wind bit through Jamal's thin sweater as he walked home. The streets were dark and empty. Jamal's stomach growled loudly, but he only had 1 coin in his pocket. It wasn't enough for a real meal. Jamal lived a hard life. His father had left years ago, and his mother worked long hours in a factory. She was sick and coughed all the time. Jamal had dropped out of school to find work, but he barely made any money. Suddenly, he heard glass shatter. He froze and hid behind the wall. Across the street, 2 men were arguing loudly. One was tall and angry, holding a crowbar. The other was small and shaking with fear. "I said pay up," the tall man yelled. The smaller man stuttered something, then ran into the fog. The tall man cursed and stomped away. Jamal's heart was racing. He knew this neighborhood was dangerous, but he couldn't afford to move away. Jamal kept walking. He planned to go to a small diner nearby. With his coin, he could buy a piece of bread and some water. It wasn't much, but it would stop his hunger for a while. When Jamal pushed open the diner's door, warm air hit him. The smell of coffee and fried food made his stomach ache even more. Mrs. Ellis, the kind woman behind the counter, smiled when she saw him. "Hello, Jamal. The usual?" Jamal nodded and placed his coin on the counter. Mrs. Ellis picked it up, frowned, and said, "Wait here." She came back with a sandwich and soup. Jamal's eyes widened. "I can't pay for this," he said. "It's on me," she said with a warm smile. Jamal felt tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. He ate slowly, savoring every bite. But as he left the diner, the darkness outside felt heavier. On his way home, Jamal saw a man slumped against a wall. The man's shirt was soaked with blood. End note. "Help me," the man groaned, shaking and crying. Jamal's heart raced. Was this a trap? But the man's weak voice sounded real. Jamal couldn't leave him there. "What happened?" Jamal asked, kneeling beside him. Blowing the cobwebs away. God, they thought, they were numb enough to let this play out. They took everything. Jamal ripped a piece of his sweater and pressed it on the man's wound. "Stay awake, I'll get help." The man grabbed Jamal's arm. His eyes were wide and desperate. "Don't trust anyone," he whispered, then passed out. Jamal's hands shook. He hoisted the man onto his back and started walking to the clinic. Each step was heavy, and fear crept into his mind. What if someone attacked him too? At the clinic, nurses rushed to help the man. Jamal sat in the corner, exhausted and scared. After a long wait, a nurse approached him. "The man will live," she said. "You saved him." Jamal felt relief wash over him, but he couldn't forget the man's last words. Don't trust anyone. The next day, Jamal visited the clinic. The injured man was awake. "You," the man said, "you saved me." Jamal shrugged. "I just did what I could." The man's name was Hassan. He told Jamal he had been delivering something important when he was attacked. He didn't say what it was, and Jamal didn't ask. Before Jamal left, Hassan handed him a note. "If you ever need help," Hassan said, "go to this address. Tell them I sent you." Jamal put the note in his pocket. unsure if he'd ever use it. Life got harder. Jamal's mother grew sicker, and they had no money for medicine. One night, as she slept, Jamal pulled out Hassan's note. He had no choice. The address led him to an old warehouse. Jamal knocked on the heavy door. A small opening slid open, and a pair of sharp eyes looked out. "Hassan sent me," Jamal said nervously. The door creaked open. Inside, the warehouse was dark and full of crates. A man with a scarred face approached Jamal. "The people died. You're not talking about them," directed the man. "You are, isn't you? You're Jamal?" Jamal nodded. "Hassan said you're trustworthy," the man said. "If you work for us, we'll pay you well." "What kind of work?" Jamal asked. The man smiled faintly. "Just deliveries." The job was dangerous. Jamal carried packages through dark alleys, always looking over his shoulder, but the money was good. He bought his mother's medicine and food for the first time in weeks. Still, something felt wrong. He didn't know what was in the packages, and he was too scared to ask. One night, while making a delivery, Jamal noticed a shadow behind him. Someone was following him. Panic surged. He ran through the foggy streets, his footsteps echoing. He turned a corner and crashed into a man. It was the tall man with the crowbar. "What's in the bag?" the man growled. Jamal clutched the package tightly. "Leave me alone." The tall man lunged at him. In the struggle, the package ripped open. Bundles of cash and a strange device spilled onto the ground. The tall man's eyes widened with greed. Jamal used the distraction to escape. He ran until he reached home, slamming the door behind him. His chest heaved as he stared at his shaking hands. He knew he couldn't keep living like this. That night, Jamal sat by his mother's bed. She looked so fragile, and he felt guilty for bringing danger into their lives. As dawn broke, Jamal made a silent promise. He would find a way out of this dark world. No matter how hard it was, he would fight for a better life, for both of them.